Where are all my moms, grandmoms, aunts, and others who want to sew things for children under the age of 5? This mashup is for you. In this video, I have gathered 9 tutorials. If you check the links in the video description, you can see what the 9 different projects are, and you'll see exactly when each one starts, because I know this is a long video, but I put it all together for you so you have everything in one place, and those links will help you figure out where they are for whichever one you want to do first. In this video, I am going to show you how to make a roll-up holder that just rolls like this and holds with an elastic strap for a pack of 8 jumbo crayons. Each crayon has its own little pocket, and it is the perfect holder for home, for storage, for the car, for travel, wherever your little one wants to take these big crayons and get creative. I'm also going to show you how to do it with directional fabric. We all know that toddlers in particular often really love things that have those characters on them. Now, it's much easier, I will say, to do a roll-up with non-directional fabric. This is made out of one piece of fabric. It is folded, sewn together, rolled up, because nothing matters as far as the direction goes. Now, with directional fabric, that becomes a problem. I made this one like it was non-directional fabric. So I cut one piece of fabric, I folded this up, and I made the pockets, and look what happened. The designs on the pocket are upside down. Total bummer. Right side up here, right side up above the crayons, but the pockets upside down. That doesn't thrill me. So today I'm going to show you, instead of using one piece of fabric, you're going to use 3 pieces of fabric, but then everything is right side up. And then I chose to use just an accent fabric because I ran out of this. I just hit my scrap bin and found something that is absolutely perfect to coordinate with this fabric. Before we get started, I'm going to share something important with you. What is really, really important for you to know and understand is this. Let's look at the legal warning here. And this may be an unpopular opinion among many people because I definitely see this heatedly debated on social media, but here's the legality of it. And I'm not a lawyer, but I have licensed my art for over 21 years, so I do understand copyrights and how this works. Always defer to the selvage. Don't believe what a girl on Facebook tells you and says, no, it's fine if you're selling less than 50 or however many, you can totally sell it. No, you cannot. This says, sold for non-commercial, home use only. That means if I make these, I cannot sell them. No money can be exchanged. I can show you how to make them. I can give this to my nephew, my great nephew, as a gift, but I cannot make these, sell these on Etsy, sell these at craft fairs, etc., etc. Now, does that mean people don't do it? Does that mean a lot of them don't get caught? But if they get caught, I can guarantee you that Paw Patrol company has a lot more money for lawyers than you do. So it's bad karma, and it is just too much of a risk, in my opinion, to take. Now, with that caveat out of the way, let's take a look at the supplies that we need. In addition to the fabric, this is what I'm going to be using today. We obviously need the crayons. You're going to need some way to mark those intervals that you will be stitching to make the pockets. You can use a heat erasable pen or pencil and a ruler. You can use painter's tape, or I am going to be using my sewing machine's seam guide, and I will show you how that works. This is especially helpful if you're going to be making a bunch of them, because you just put it in your sewing machine, set it up, and it is good to go for as many intervals as you want. Some clips, quilter's clapper, rotary cutter, and I'm also going to be using a hot ruler. This and this, totally optional, but I love them both, and I think they make things go faster and smoother. A hot ruler, it's like this flexible, kind of fuzzy feeling ruler. You can iron right on it. Now, let's get to the fabric. So just to review, if this was non-directional, or I didn't care if half of it was upside down on the pocket, I would just use 2 pieces of fabric cut to the same size. But because I want everything right side up, we're going to be using 3 pieces of fabric. This is going to be the inside. This fabric is going to be where this green is. So it's on the inside of the pocket. I'm going to sew these 2 fabrics together so that they're the same size as this one, but so that when we fold it up, the pocket fabric will be right side up like it is on this roll up, instead of upside down like it is on this one. I had a decision to make. I could have used this for the inside and these two for the outside, so it would have been more similar to this, but I know this kid loves Paw Patrol and he would rather see as many Paw Patrol characters than green, so we're gonna go with all three pieces like this. So our inside fabric is cut to 11 inches by 10 inches high. The outside fabric is cut to 11 inches by 6.5 inches, and this is our pocket fabric, and this one is cut to 11 inches by 4.5 inches. The first thing we need to do is we need to put these two together and sew them together. Here's the key to getting everything right side up. These need to be reverse. So this is right side up, this is upside down. Put them together, add some clips, and sew along here with a 1/4 inch seam. I grabbed a piece of scrap fabric that I'm going to be using a lot for this project, and it is called a leader fabric because it leads your sewing. What you do is you put it on top of your feed dogs and you start sewing on this scrap fabric. Leave a little bit of space before you go on to your project and then sew to your project. That way, if there's any bird's nests or anything, they're going to be back on this leader fabric and you don't have to take the time to pull up your bobbin thread. The main thing to remember is that when you get to your project, just go a few stitches, then go backwards and forwards to lock the stitches on your project. Now that we have sewn these two pieces together, I'm going to set my seam. This is something very commonly done in quilting. And what it means is you just iron over your stitch line before you fold anything back. And then I come back and I press with my clapper. If you're not familiar with this, it's a piece of unfinished wood. It absorbs the heat and it helps to press any air or wiggle in the fabric so this is nice and flat. Taking the seconds to do that whenever you are sewing makes your end result just that much more professional. Now I'm just going to push this forward and we are going to iron that down and press that again, gets the heat out and really sets that press. The next step is to put these together, right sides together, and sew. But you'll notice the one where we put two pieces together is a little bit longer, and that's actually on purpose. I didn't want it to be short if somehow your seam was a little bit more than a 1/4 inch. So I added this little step where you're just going to line this up, lining it up with the bottom 4.5 inch section, and then just turn it and trim that edge to match. It's basically a 1/2 inch if your seams are perfect, but cutting that off and having it correct is better than having it too short. If you have lefties, like my dad in your family, and you want to be able to say, and I made it for you because you're left-handed, here's what you're going to do. You're going to put these together. If you want it to be left-handed, leave the left side open, so these three sides. If you want it to be right-handed, you're going to leave the right side open, so these three sides. We're going to make it right-handed because pretty sure I'm just going to put a few clips to keep this lined up and also remind me which of the three sides I'm going to be sewing. Then we're going to go and sew these with a 1/4 inch seam. Our next step is to clip these corners without clipping the stitching. And I like to do it in 2 steps, cutting at a deeper angle than you would get if you just cut straight across. That will have less fabric that needs to get folded in there and give you a better corner when you turn it right side out. The next step, you have a decision to make, and I'm going to show you my current favorite way. When we turn this right side out and to make our holder, we're going to have to turn this raw edge in, so it'll go inside when it's right side out, a 1/4 inch, which most people turn it right side out and then fold that in and press. I currently like to press before turning it right side out because I can see that I'm doing it straight. You can just eyeball it like that, or you can use your hot ruler, put it there, and then make sure that that edge is folded over right to that first line, which is a 1/4 inch, and press. Don't go all the way to the end because that's folded. So I usually go about 1 inch from the end, get that pressed, then I turn it over, and I do the same thing on this side. Keep the other side folded under as you're doing this. Or on the second side, you can just eyeball it and make it line up with the first side. But now you have these two ends to deal with. So what I do is I just open it up a little bit, and then I just fold that down so that it is even with the two sides where it was already pressed. Let me know in the comments if you've tried this, if you're gonna try it, if you just prefer the other way, or if you have other little tricks. This part's just always a teeny bit of work no matter how you do it. Okay, so we have that done. Now we're going to turn it right side out, getting those corners pushed out. And if they're not pushing out well enough with your fingers, grab a turning tool or even a chopstick. And you just, whatever you use, you want to push very gently and just push that out as well as you can. And then we just need to get this pressed nice and flat with these seams out. You don't want it tucked in like that and folded at all. So just take a minute. I usually just kind of roll my fingers to make sure that's out, and I do one side at a time. Make sure this stays folded under as you are pressing this. You can use your clapper if you want to. You don't have to. So I got that one side done. This is the folded side. This is the tucked under side. So I'm going to do the other sewn side. And then I'm going to just push out to flatten that fold so everything is nice and flat. So this is the inside. This is the outside with the two pieces. This one, the top's here. This one, the top's here. So now comes the magic. What you're going to do is you're going to make sure this stays tucked in. And then you're going to fold this up at that seam line, which is basically folding it up 4 inches. Now, if you want to use the hot ruler just to make sure you get it turned nice and straight, this is more important, honestly, when you're doing non-directional fabric, but I sometimes use it with the directional as well. I make sure this is lined up on the edge. And I just kind of move it and make sure that seam line is right on the edge of my ruler. Everything's lining up. And then you can just press right over that ruler. Then because there's a slight thickness to that, I usually take it off, press it one last quick time, and then hit it with the clapper. We have the left side open. This is the folded side, and this is folded up. Now what we need to do is we need to make our pockets for our crayons and add our elastic loop. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch, just slightly less than 1/4 inch on the folded side. And I like to go all the way from the bottom to the top, just so it's going to be even and kind of hold this top part together when we get here. So let's head back to the sewing machine. When I can, I just pull the threads out of the leader fabric so they don't get in my way. Now I'm going to be sewing down this side. And this is basically the first stitch to hold this pocket together and establish the first seam of which we're going to measure all of the pocket stitching off of. Now you need to decide how you want to draw your lines or add your guidelines for sewing each of the pockets for the crayons. This is 1-inch painter's tape, which is perfect for regular size crayons. But jumbo crayons, we need 1 1/4 inches in between the stitch line. So what you can do if you want to use the painter's tape is pull a piece off, put it right on that stitch line. You want to make sure it doesn't go off of your fabric like that, because then it will stick to your sewing machine and things won't move smoothly. So make sure painter's tape is always on your fabric if you use it. And now we are just going to sew 1/4 inch beyond that tape. I'm going to be pulling up my bobbin thread so that I can start on this side. So put my foot down, put my needle down, holding my thread, pick it up, give it a little tug, grab the bobbin thread, put them both under the needle, go forward a few stitches, still holding these threads, backwards a few stitches, and then keep going. So now with the 1-inch tape and the 1/4 inch beyond it, we have the perfect distance for the jumbo crayons. So we can just lift this painter's tape, put it down on this stitch line, and do the same thing. That's one way to go. And honestly, that works pretty easily. We're used to sewing 1/4 inch from edges, so why not sew 1/4 inch from tape? You're going to be able to use that for at least one crayon roll up. If you're doing multiple, it might start to lose its stick, but let me know in the comments if you try it for multiple and how many times you can move this and get it to stay in place. The next way would be to take a ruler and use a pencil or a heat erasable pen, put the 1 1/4 line right on that stitch line, draw the line, and just sew on the drawn lines. The third way is to use the seam guide. Most sewing machines, if not all, come with a seam guide. Mine is metal, sometimes they are plastic, but it's basically this piece that's bent at a 90-degree angle, and you can put it into your foot and you can use this as a guide, similar to using the numbers on your needle plate, but this will work as you move across fabric. I use it a lot for straight line machine quilting and also for projects like this. So I am putting it into a walking foot. This is a Janome sewing machine. If you have one of these and want to use it, look at your manual. It'll tell you how to do it on your machine, but this is the basics. So you put it in and you just push it through. It's coming out over here. You just can't see that. And then you're going to line it up for the increment that you need, which is 1 1/4. Now, when this seam guide runs along a stitch line, I know that I will be sewing 1 1/4 inches away on this side. So this is my favorite way of doing it, especially if I'm making a lot. I just set this once and I just keep using it. There's no tape to move. I don't have to draw lines all the time. I just keep rocking and rolling. So if I wanted to start off the end of the fold, I just flipped this to the other side and put it in. So it's basically upside down because this is designed for right-handed sewing, but I can have it so that it is on the left-hand side. It goes on the stitch line, and then I could use the leader fabric. Now, when you get to this last one, depending on how well you press this under and did your seams, I always do a quick size check before doing the second to the last line. Do I actually have 1 1/4 inch if I sew here and then a little bit more than 1 1/4 inch? And I do. So 1 1/4 inch here and a little bit more over here, so that's going to be perfect. You just want to make sure your last spot doesn't get a little bit too small for your jumbo crayon or whatever you're making a roll up for. And if it does, you just scooch that over maybe a teeny bit and it'll be a little bit snugger, but we do not have that problem. So now we have sewn the pockets all the way from this first end to here, and we're not sewing this yet until we put that elastic in. Now for the elastic, for an 8 jumbo crayon roll, you need a 7-inch piece of elastic. You're just going to fold that in half, matching those raw edges. We're going to want to put it in halfway between the bottom and the top of the roll. So I just fold it in half just to get an idea of where that halfway mark is, right there. So basically at the top of that bone. Now, here's an important part. You don't want to put it in between the 2 layers of the pocket. You want to put it in between the 2 layers of the backing. So the longer fold, not the shorter fold. So I'm just going to lift that up, put that in right at that bone. If it's not quite even, it's totally fine. And I'm putting that in about a little over 1/4 inch. And then I'm just going to clip that in place. Now, because this is pretty thick, because we have all the folded in part, I highly recommend pulling your bobbin thread up. And then I'm going to use this. It's another kind of leader fabric. It's basically a spacer. It's a piece of fabric I've folded and I just use over and over again to kind of get the fabric even. What this does is it helps your machine and your foot and your feed dogs move things when you're starting on the very edge of something rather thick. You basically want to use something that is going to be about the same height as the project you're working on, so your foot stays nice and straight. So I'm putting that back there. We're not going to stitch in that at all, unlike this one. Pull that bobbin thread up. These 2 pieces just push off the back, and we're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the edge just to make sure that we catch and close all of that part that we folded under. And then I use my scissors to hold it in place, keeping my fingers well away from that needle. Now to make sure that that stays nice and secure, we're going to backstitch over the elastic and also over the edge of the pocket. Now it is ready to clip all the threads and add the crayons. Now it is all done. Everything is right side up. Oh my gosh, my great nephew is going to love this. So now you're just going to put all the crayons in there. He's probably going to need help getting these crayons back in here, but it is a great way to carry crayons on the go. Slip it in your purse really easily. It doesn't take up a lot of room. You just roll it up like that. Take the elastic, and there you go. So if you don't want your kid to have screen time, just bring some paper, crayons, or a coloring book, and you are ready to go. This is the jumbo crayons. Let me just show you one other thing, and that is jumbo markers. Jumbo markers, or the washable markers, just broad tip markers. The washable ones, just these fatties, right? They are basically the same width as the crayons. So you're going to be sewing an 1.25 inches across for each one, but they're a little bit taller. So the main difference between this and this is the markers come with 10 in a box, so you're going to need your fabric to be a little bit wider, and they're slightly taller than the crayon, so you're going to need your fabric to be slightly taller. So for a non-directional holder like this one, for the broadline, aka fat markers, you're going to need your fabric to be 26 inches wide by 7.5 inches high. Fold it up 4 inches just like we did with this, and sew at 1.5 inch increments. So there you have it. That is how you would do a jumbo crayon 8 set with directional fabric so that everything is in the right direction and not upside down like it is on this one. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, share on social media, and if you make any of these and share them, be sure to tag me so I can see what fabric combo you decided to make. Happy sewing!
In today's episode, we're going to be making something for baby, one of my favorite projects, which is a big, soft, snuggly hooded towel. And we're just going to go the simple way so we can whip these out. It makes a great baby shower gift, something great to make for your own baby, and they are just wonderful. If you go to the store, I went to Target, grab 2 bath towels, 1 hand towel, and some scraps of fabric that you like, or if you want it to be even faster, a 2 or 3 inch wide ribbon. You can make 2 of these hooded towels in no time flat. We're going to set our bath towel aside for now, and we are going to work with our hand towel. So we're going to lay this open, and we're going to measure how wide it is. So this one is 17 inches. The reason we need to know that is we're going to be preparing our fabric. So I'm using this scrap of the Crayola Colors of Kindness by Riley Blake Designs. And since our hand towel is 17 inches wide, we need a piece of fabric that is 19 inches by 4 inches. Then we're going to be pressing it and turning it into a 2 inch wide piece that will go across the hood and be super cute. So I'm going to start by cutting a 4 inch wide strip. And then 19, since this is folded in half, we need 19 divided by 2, which is going to be 9.5. And I open that up and double check my work. Okay, 19. Now I'm going to grab an iron and the ironing board. Okay, we have our 19 inch piece of fabric. I'm going to turn that right side down. I'm going to give it a little mist because I am using an iron without steam. Are you a steamer or do you prefer to put your water right onto your fabric? Let me know in the comments. So the first thing I'm doing is I am pressing this in half, and then we're going to open it back up, and we're going to press each side into the center, and that is going to give us a beautiful 2 inch strip of this Crayola fabric with the raw edges put on the inside. I like to use regular size towels so the kids can grow into them. They can just be super big and fluffy for babies, but then they can even use them as they become toddlers. And we're going to go back to our hand towel. Now, the reason we can do 2 hooded towels from each hand towel is that these hand towels are nice and long. So what we're going to do is we are going to line up one of the sewn edges, and then you're going to cut 10 inches from that side. So you're going to have a hood that has 3 edges that are already sewn, and then the one raw edge, which is the one that we're going to attach to the towel So you don't have to deal with bias tape and all the things like that with this project. We're all about just getting this done fast, cute, and ready to use. So I'm doing the same thing, just cutting that at 10 inches. And then we have just a little bit of extra. So I'm going to save this. I might sew it with some flannel to the other side and make a cute little washcloths. We'll just set that aside for now. And we will also set aside the second top. You do want to make sure you don't let a lot of fuzz stay on your cutting mat, because if it stays in those grooves, your mat won't last as long. All right, we're going to get the ironing board back up here. And you want to pin this onto the right side of your towel. So this should be the inside of the hood. See where it's folded over, and this is going to be the outside. So you'll notice we made it a little bit longer. And the reason I have it back on here is because we are going to press these ends so that they are the perfect length for this hand towel. And even each end might be a little bit different. So you just always want to do it. And you can decide where you want to put it, closer to the edge, further up. That's totally personal decision. So you'll see I just folded that over. I'm going to give that a little press. And then I'm just going to pin those ends. You want to make sure you don't pin it to your ironing board. Then we're just going to make sure it's going straight across your towel. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're just going to fold that under so that it matches the edge of our towel. Then you're just going to put a few pins to hold it in place and make sure it's going to stay straight. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around all four sides to secure this to the hood of the towel. Now I have my fabric on there, and so now I'm going to fold this in half with the fabric side in. And we're going to match these raw edges, and you can clip or pin them together. And then we are going to sew the raw edge together. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch seam, or you can do a zigzag. We basically want to get this sewn together and also try and encase some of this edge, because it is, a towel. And so it is going to kind of fray apart if we don't somehow overlock that. So I'm going to do a zigzag stitch, a little more than a 1/4 inch. So let's see how this goes. I do have a walking foot on here, but it doesn't work for zigzag, I'm learning. So if you want to zigzag with two terry cloth, it almost is sitting still. So I'm just kind of pulling and helping the bottom feed dogs by pulling on the top. This might be one reason to do 2 straight lines, but I really do like how this is encapsulating it. So you can see up here is where it just kind of sat still. And so those stitches are really close together, but here you can't see them as well because I was helping to move that fabric through. And it did go over the edges, so it's not going to fray a lot when it's washed. So now we have our hood, and we are ready to go back and pin it to the towel, and we are almost done. Now that our hood is done, we have to connect it to our towel. And we're going to fold the towel in half with the wrong sides in, so your tags are going to be in. And we basically need to find the center of one of the long ends. So not this shorter end, but the long end, because you want the short end to wrap around them like a big hug. Okay, and now we're going to take our hood, and this is where we sewed together, and we're going to put that right inside the folded towel. We're going to overlap, about a 1/2 inch. And then we're just going to pin that on. When we sew it, we're probably going to go from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fold that back and pin half. And then I'm going to flip it. And you just want to make sure it's overlapping about the same so that the hood is a nice size, and pin the rest of this together. So let me know in the comments if you're going to use this as a little side hustle or for your own kids or as a gift. Now, the hardest part of this project is sewing over that really fat fabric part where it's folded. So I don't like to cut it off. I just like to go really slow. And then I like to start before it. So you're going to start where you're just sewing onto the big towel, and then just go super, super slow over this thick part, and pray that you do not break your needle or your thread. All right, we've got this. And then you can go faster once your foot is safely off of that big lump. Then you just want to keep moving everything so it's flat for the next few inches where you're going to sew, because right here is where we sewed this together. So it's not totally flat. You just need to keep manipulating it, keeping it flat in between your pins. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more hooded towel options, how to make them maybe into a cute little dog face or another animal, or if you just, this is fine, keeping it super simple. Let me know if you want to see more tutorials like this that are a little bit different and maybe a little bit more decorative or intricate. All right, now I'm back to the fat part again, so go really slow, and we're going to sew about an inch past there. And then we're going to turn, and we're going to go back the other way. Back here, so go real slow again, and then we're going to go about 1/2 inch to an inch over, and then we're going to knot it, and it will be all done. And the reason we went twice was just to give that towel a little bit more strength and stability for long-term use. And that is it. It is done. So simple.
Here are the supplies we need to make this cute initial washcloth mitt. First, you're going to need a letter, and you're going to need it in reverse. You can use any alphabet that you like. If you are a member of Sew with Tara Reid, you can find the entire alphabet in just these block letters in the membership area. I'm going to be using a C for my little great nephew Connor. Then you need a washcloth. I'm going to be using Heat and Bond Light Sewable. It's an iron-on adhesive. It's very light, so it's not going to make the letter really stiff on there. I'm going to use a tonal fabric, a solid or a texture, but something that's not super specific, like chickens, is going to work better for this project. Then fabric scissors, iron, pencil, sewing machine. You're going to need to be able to zigzag, and that's about it. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the letter that I want to use. Actually, I don't even have to do that because we were going to trace it, but it's already cut, so die is cast. I'm going to get my Heat and Bond Light. Now, this is an iron-on adhesive, so it's shiny on the one side. That's the part that's going to stick. And then the other side is paper. So I'm just going to trace the letter C onto the Heat and Bond Light Sewable. Not totally perfect, but it is definitely good enough. I'm just going to cut that little piece out. No matter what kind of product you're going to use to get your letter onto the fabric and then onto the washcloth, you want to make sure you follow the directions for how to adhere it. Place this on the back of the fabric, which is why we needed this in reverse. And then we're just going to press down for about 2 seconds. Now we want it to cool a little bit and make sure that that is stuck, which it is. And I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut out the letter C. So now we have our C that is going to be appliqued onto the washcloth that we are going to turn into a washcloth mitt. So let's look at our washcloth next. Now, not all washcloths are square. This one has bigger ends on 2 sides. Some of them are the same on all 4 sides. So it just really depends on what your washcloth looks like for how you're going to be putting it together. Because I have this nice finish, I want that to be at the end, like where my hand goes in. So I'm going to turn it over. So this is obviously the back because you have the folded over and you have the tag, which I'm going to cut off. And I'm going to fold it in half with this part at the bottom. Now, just to make sure it's going to work, I'm going to put my hand in there. Make sure there's going to be enough room, even with a 1/4 inch seam. Yep, that is going to be good. I'm going to cut this part off. And so I'm going to just sew it straight. But if you want it to be a little fancier, you could also cut a curve and sew a curved mitt. This is how the mitt is going to be. And we're going to lose about a 1/4 inch. We want the letter C to be pretty much centered. So you want to put it a little bit closer to the folded side than this side, because again, seam allowance. And then you can decide how far up you want it to be. I'm just going to put it, maybe it's 1.5 inches from the trim. I think that is going to be a nice spot. I don't know how I forget this, but sometimes I forget to peel the paper off of the back of my piece. So you want to peel that gently so that the adhesive still stays on the fabric and doesn't come off with the paper. And you'll know that that has worked because it will make it shiny. And quilting fabric is not shiny unless it has something stuck to it. No steam, press down. And this is going to take a little bit longer to adhere to the terry towel because it is thicker and bumpier than it did to adhere to the quilting fabric. So I'm just going to leave that on a little bit longer. Now this doesn't have to be stuck for dear life because it's not the only way it's going to be sewn onto here. We are going to zigzag around. But having this adhere pretty well is what is going to hold it in place as you do your zigzag. I forgot to mention using a stabilizer when we were talking about the supplies. This is a water-soluble stabilizer. It's just a thin film that I'm going to put on the back of the towel behind the letter. It is going to help the sewing machine move more easily than if we tried to zigzag just with this. Because it's so bumpy, it's a little harder for the feed dogs to move around, especially with such tight curves. So I'm just going to cut that a little bit bigger than the C so that I can pin it in place. So I'll just turn it over, make sure the pins are on that. Good to go. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do some zigzag. If you are new to zigzag stitching and applique, zigzag is basically a stitch that just goes back and forth, and you can make it go back and forth really close together or further apart. For something like this, where we're sewing all the way around the edge, I like it to be pretty close together and sort of wide. Look at your sewing machine manual to see how to make that change. I'm going to do about 4.5 wide, and then I'm going to make it a 0.75 distance. It's a good idea to test the length. I'm also using a red top thread and a blue bobbin thread so that it's going to be matching the C on the top and then the blue on the back. So let's just see how close and wide that is going to be. It's not super close, but it's definitely going to be close enough. You don't want to go too close when you're sewing on a towel, because it gets a bit more difficult. This is going to be good. Now you'll also notice with the foot, it is wide open here and you can really see what is going on. So if your machine has a foot that is specific for applique, you want to use it. That doesn't mean there aren't other feet that can work. Like this one could work because you can see it has a wide area here so the needle can go back and forth. But look what happens when we put that down on the fabric. It is a lot harder to see what's happening as that foot would be moving. So use the best foot that you have for applique. Now mine is going to start, the needle is going to go down on the left side. So I'm putting it so that it is going to go down inside the fabric. Then I'm just going to take one stitch. I want to make sure that when it goes down on the right side, it's going on the outside of the fabric. That is how you're going to stop this fabric from fraying. You're basically encasing it in this zigzag stitch. Now, when you get to a point, like when we get down here, you always want to stop with your needle down on the right-hand side, which is the outside, and then you're going to lift your foot and pivot. Okay, so I went slightly beyond. I have it stopped on the right-hand side, and each letter is going to be a little different for how it's going to work for doing the applique part. Now I'm going to go just straight a stitch or two. I need it to stop on the right though, because I didn't want the stitching to go off of the C. So if I kept going forward, the right-hand side would go into the fabric. So I'm just going to have to keep stopping and pivoting to get this inside curve. Now initials that just have straight lines are going to be a lot easier, but then there are also some with more curves like an S or a P that has very tight curves that is going to take a lot more up and down. And it just really takes patience and paying attention and going slowly. See how easy that was? And it looks amazing. Now that we have the C appliqued on there, we are going to fold this right sides together. So basically hide our C. And then I'm going to just turn this and I'm going to cut off this top edge. Just making sure that my cut is going to be parallel to the fold and to this side. Then I'm going to clip here and down this side. Now you'll notice the only raw edge that we are going to have to deal with is on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge and then right next to this trim. And then I'm going to come back and use your zigzag feature again to really just kind of encapsulate that on the top. So back to the sewing machine. Now I have a walking foot on because that is going to make it move a lot better because the towel is quite thick. And I'm also going to be using leader fabric. Leader fabric is just small pieces of fabric, and I've just folded fabric and made little loops and zigzagged them so that I can use them over and over again. It's basically a fabric that you're going to butt up to the end to help your sewing machine get going. See how that's now even. So you're going to put it under here, and then you're not going to sew on those. You're going to sew on the terry towel. But when you put the foot down, it's going to stay flat. It's not going to be tilted. And so that is better for the longevity of your machine. And it's also going to help get you moving faster, less likely to get big old snarl knots, etc., etc. This is going to be a little bit more than 1/4 inch because I want to make sure I am on the terry cloth and not this finished edge of the washcloth, but I want to keep that finished edge so I have less potential fraying when I'm using this. Now that is a huge lump and it's doubled up. So I'm just going to try and sew to the edge of it and not try and get over that because that is just the potential to break your needle and not worth it. I'm going to open a little bit on the end. You could hand stitch that, or if you want to try and get your sewing machine over that, you can. I'm just going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to change my foot again so that I can zigzag over this edge to stop it from falling apart and fraying everywhere. If I had done a curve, I just would have done the same thing and zigzagged on the curve. And now it's done. All we need to do is turn it right side out, and we have a really cute washcloth mitt. And I really think this is going to be so much easier if you've ever tried to bathe a toddler. They're moving around and playing with toys, and sometimes just having this big washcloth that you're trying to hold and keep on your hand and flop around is difficult. So having something where you can just put your hand in it and do that. This can also be something that you can let the kids play with and teach them to start washing themselves too. It would be great with a hooded towel. So check the links below this video for some of the hooded towel tutorials that I have done as well. And you can make a towel and a washcloth to match. Happy sewing and keep clean. Hello, today we are going to make bean bags. When my son was little, I used to love planning his birthday parties. I was one of those crazy moms that had it at our house. And one of my go-to games was bean bags. And he got new bean bags every year, because that had to go with the theme too. Bean bags are great for parties. They could be great for school parties. You just to play and have fun. Something for the kids to do while you're camping. Something for the whole family to do while you're camping. So many ways to use this quick and easy sewing project. And I have done a lot of the work for you. First, I want to tell you there's a wide variety of prices when it comes to beans and different sizes. So you want to get dry beans. You can get a little bag of beans. These are kidney beans. Or you can go big and get 8 pounds of beans. My son is 31 and I couldn't remember how big the bean bags were that I used to make for him. So I became Goldilocks and the bean bags. Depending on the size of the square that you make will depend on how many beans you need. This 5.5 by 5.5 inch square, or if you have some 5 by 5 pre-cut scraps, it's going to be about this size. You can use these too. This is going to need a cup of beans. This teeny tiny size is going to need a 1/4 cup of beans, which apparently is what they consider a serving of beans on the back of all of these dry bean bags. And then the size that I am going to recommend you do is the 4.5 by 4.5, which will need a 1/2 cup of beans. If you get a pound, this says 10 servings, that's a 1/4 cup. We need a 1/2 cup, so we can make about 5 bean bags from a pound of beans. That might be good. Now let's look at my big bag. 8 pounds of pinto beans has 103 1/4 cup servings, so I can make about 50 bean bags with this. So you would definitely want to do this if you're doing this for like a community event, or you want to give bean bags as a party favor, or you want to sell them. Whatever, that's when you're going to need this big bag. I'm not exactly sure why I need this big bag, except to show it to you now. Now that we have all of those sizes out of the way, let me show you how quick and easy these are to make. Let's start with our supplies. We obviously need beans of some sort. I'm going to be using a measuring cup. I'm going to be doing the 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares, which will need about a 1/2 cup of beans. Now, I can tell you from experience, you do not want to try and pour the beans from this bag into the fabric bag without using a funnel, or they will be everywhere. Guess how I know? So I'm using a piece of cardstock and some tape. We're going to make a funnel. You need a little iron, or you can use any kind of iron. I'm just going to use this little mini one. And then fabric and some clips, rotary cutter and a blade. So I have cut this Paw Patrol fabric. I'm making these for my great nephew. He is a huge fan of this show right now. So it's 4.5 inches wide. I'm just going to cut as many 4.5 inch squares as I can, and I will start by just cutting off those selvages on the end. All right, I have this folded in half, so that's one bean bag. 2 bean bags, 3 bean bags, 4 bean bags, and not quite 5 bean bags. Yeah, that's too small. We'll keep that for something else. Now, if you wanted to fussy cut these, you obviously could. You would need more fabric to get as many. But what I would do if I was going to fussy cut them, this is a 4.5-inch square, so it's exactly the size that I need. And I love it because the blue, it shows you exactly where your seam allowance is. Put him right in the center. Cut that. I'll definitely use that. So you can fussy cut or you can just go with whatever it ends up being. We're going to make 4 bean bags. So you're going to take your 2 squares, you're going to put them right sides together. We're going to sew 3 of the sides with a 1/4-inch seam. And because this is beans, it's not something thin, it's not flaxseed or anything like that, you can just use a regular stitch length. You don't have to go small. Okay, so I have them all matched up. Now we're going to head to the sewing machine and sew those together. Because these are bean bags that we're making, it isn't going to matter if the seam allowance is off a little bit. So I'm not even going to pin these. I'm just going to line them up, and they're not really big. I'm going to use a leader fabric before we put the first one down, which basically means a scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to have under my foot and over my feed dogs. Then I'm going to put this down. And I'm going to sew from that onto this. That will make sure there are no bird's nests on our actual project, and you don't have to worry about pulling up that bobbin thread. Once you get onto this fabric, you want to go back and forth, and then we're just going to sew the 3 sides with a 1/4-inch seam. I'm just going to cut that off. And then I'm just going to daisy chain these and keep going. You could let them swing around or cut them off as you go. And you can see every seam isn't a perfect 1/4-inch, but it does not matter because, again, it's a bean bag. Now that all 4 of these are sewn together, we are going to clip the corners on those bottom corners where we sewed. And I don't like to cut straight across like that. It's hard to see the thread. Sorry, it matches. Because then you still have all of this fabric that needs to go inside. So I like to cut at more of an angle and do 2 clips, making sure you don't snip the stitching. I'm just gonna snip the corners on all 4. Have you ever made bean bags before? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know if this is something that you've done for your kids like I did for mine, if you do it for schools, for church events, or how and when you have used bean bags, or how and when you think you might use them. Okay, now we are going to just turn them all right side out. Let's see, using my finger, I really can't get that corner out very well, so I'm going to grab a turning tool. You can use the tip of a pencil if it's not sharp. You can use a chopstick, just something that you can very gently push that corner out. You don't want to do it hard because you don't want to come through that stitching. So I'm just using this. It has a nice blunt edge, but it does the job. These could be a really cute gift. If you're having family barbecue, you could make 3 or 4 in different fabrics for each child so that they know which is theirs. They can have little contests, kind of like horseshoes, but no big pieces of metal getting thrown around. Just some fun bean bags. And you can throw these into anything. You can use bowls, you can use buckets. You could put hula hoops out on the lawn and you just have to get it into the hula hoop. You could put chalk marks on a driveway and try and aim for a certain spot. Now I'm just going to do a really quick press. Pressing this doesn't need to be super precise because it's going to be full of beans. But the main thing and the main trick is you want to fold this under and press it before you add your beans. So the best way to do that is to take the seam and fold that down first. So fold both of the seams down, and then when you pull like that, the rest is just going to fall into place. And that is going to have these edges held out better than if you tried to start folding on the inside. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we're going to prep all 4 of these. If you were to buy the 1-pound bag for $1 at Walmart, each bean bag is going to be about 17 cents in beans. And then your fabric scraps and your time to sew squares together, press and sew this shut. This would be an amazing project if you're looking for things to sew and sell. You can use your scraps of fabric. You can really just whip up a bunch of these all at once, and you can get your pinto beans quite inexpensively if you buy 8 pounds or even go get a Costco size. This would also be a great project to use if you're teaching kids to sew, because it's all straight stitching and then it's something fun that they can go home with. We're done with the iron. So now we need to make our funnel. You can use regular paper, but if you have a little bit thicker, I would recommend that. So we want to make a funnel that's big enough that it's going to be fast and easy, but also make sure that it goes in. So I'm going to leave like an inch on either side to make sure it has room to open up. I'm going to test that before I put the tape on. So can I get my fabric on there? Yes, that fits really nicely. Tape that together and we have our bean funnel. So you're going to take your fabric, put in your funnel, take your half a cup of beans, pour that in, put that back together, put a little clip on and move on to the next one. Now, if you're doing this with kids, I would put more than one clip. I just know that I'm going to be able to hold these closed well as I take them to the sewing machine. If you're newer or you're nervous or you're working with kids, definitely do 2 or 3. So now we got to go back to the sewing machine. Now you want to make sure you keep these edges together and the beans away from where your presser's foot is going to be. So kind of push to keep the beans over here so that's nice and flat. I'm going to use my leader fabric again. And I am using a thread that matches so that it's not going to really show up on the fabric. It made it a little harder for you to see when I was cutting the corners because I had already put that in. Again, just make sure you are holding those beans back away. And when you're sewing these shut, you just want to make sure you're sewing and catching this folded part. You don't want to sew under here and then have that flapping out. One thing I love about bean bags is they're quick and easy and they're not an exact science like some other projects. Then you're just going to cut them apart and cut any of that extra thread off that's in between each bean bag. Now we have 4 bean bags and it is time to go have some fun. Hi. You didn't think I was really going to be coming out of the shower, did you? Today, I'm going to show you how to make this super cute hooded towel that looks like a dog. It is made out of a hand towel and a bath towel, and then I used pieces of a hand towel, or you could use a washcloth for the ears with some fabric lining. If you saw my first video about how to do a simple DIY hooded towel, you saw the cutest little kid as the model. Well, he is turning 2, he loves his hooded towel, and he needs new ones. I hope he loves it as much as I do. So let me show you how you can whip this up. Let's quickly go over the supplies that we're going to need to make this super cute dog hooded towel. Obviously, you're going to need some towels. You need 1 bath towel and 1 hand towel that will be the hood. You're going to need fabric scissors, a rotary cutter, and I highly recommend putting in a new rotary blade because you're going to be cutting through some thick material. Then you're going to need towel for the ears. I'm going to use this extra towel for the nose and the eyes, and then this little white piece for the spot on the eye. Then I highly recommend using fabric for the lining of the ears. It's just going to make things go a lot easier, and it's going to make that ear droop a little bit better. Plus, it's just a fun surprise, whatever kind of fabric you decide to put on the inside. You're also going to want a lint brush because boy, oh boy, when you cut terry towel, it makes a mess. I am going to be using Heat and Bond Light Sewable to help cut out the shapes, hold the terry cloth together a little bit, and adhere them to the hood. Heat and Bond also has a product called Soft Stretch Light. It was designed for knit fabrics. It's very soft. It's not going to add any thickness or rigidity to your towels. This is what I could find in the store, so this is what I'm going to use. You can use a similar product. You just want something that is going to help you bond the shapes to the hood to make the face, and something that isn't going to make it stiff. You're going to need sewing pins, and I recommend some clips, but you can get away with just pins. A piece of string, thread, ribbon. I'll show you what we need that for later. You can use a stabilizer. I'm going to talk a little bit about options with that when we talk about the zigzag stitching. You're going to need to be able to straight and zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. And then I am going to tell you the sizes of these. If you just want to do this from the video, I do have a PDF with these templates and this layout chart for my Sew with Tara Reid members. Now that we have the supplies out of the way, let's get started. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to take the Heat and Bond Light Sewable, or that's what I'm going to be using. You can use whatever product you want. I'm not sure if temporary fusible adhesive would work on towels. You can let me know in the comments if you've ever tried that. I like this. It is a two-sided iron-on adhesive, and it's paper on one side, and it's nice and see-through. So I'm going to be tracing the eyes, the nose, and the eye spot. Oh, that should say two. We need 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 eye spot that we need with this. These eyes are about a 1 1/4 inch wide by 1 1/2 inches high. You're going to cut 2. The nose, and you can do a little bit different shape too, obviously. The nose is about 2 1/4 and then about 1 1/2 at the tallest spot. And you just kind of make a nose shape. You can make any shape that you want. Then I did the eye spot, little over 2 1/2 inches tall by 2 1/4 wide. And again, if you want to make it like a more interesting shape, like maybe sort of oblong, you can do whatever you want. So let's trace these shapes. And remember, we need to trace 2 of the eye. And because these are symmetrical shapes, it doesn't matter what direction they are. I'm just grabbing some craft scissors and I'm going to cut these out. I'm not cutting on the lines. I'm just cutting pretty close to them just so we don't adhere onto things that we don't need to. I'm going to bring my little ironing board and iron up here. And we're going to double check the directions. Preheat iron to medium, no steam. Place adhesive on the back of the material to be bonded. So that is going to be our black. So there's really no front or back to this. So I can do whichever side I want. We're going to do the nose and the 2 eyes. I'm just going to press for about 2 seconds. I think it takes a little bit longer for this to adhere because it is a towel. I'm gonna let that cool and make sure that is adhered nicely. We are not going to do the eye spot until we have sewn the eye onto this fabric so that we can really control where this black part of the eye is going to be in relation to the spot. So we're going to set that aside for now. Now this makes a huge mess. So you definitely want to do it over top of a trash can or a bowl or something to catch all the pieces of the terry cloth that are going to come out as you cut these 3 shapes. And you'll see I ended up with a lot of lint, even though I did do that over the trash. So most of it went into the trash. I'm going to take this white fabric that we're using for the spot, and I am just going to adhere 1 eye kind of in the center, and then we will figure out where we want that later. Take the paper off of the back. Last time I tried this, I forgot that step and couldn't understand why it wasn't sticking. So don't forget that step. Place that down and press. All right, we are stuck now. And we're going to be zigzagging around and sewing that down, but I find that adhering it like this really helps to keep it in place for the sewing step. Before I start zigzagging all these things together, let's talk about stabilizers and why you might want one and what they actually do and a few options. So when you're doing applique, you're going to be doing a lot of stitching and moving around the shape. This isn't a super complicated shape, so that's fine, but we are going to be zigzagging onto towel, and the hood towel is even puffier, right? So it's got even more depth than this kitchen towel. That can be a little bit hard for your feed dogs to really move things around, and so it can get a little bit stiff. So the idea of using a stabilizer is so that you have something between your feed dogs and your material. It's going to help it move easier. This is a water-soluble interfacing. If you do machine embroidery, you will probably have this hanging around your house. It's a great, great option because it's going to provide you the stability and it's going to help everything move faster, and then it will wash away. You'll never know it was even there. You could use a really light interfacing. You just want to make sure you pick something that is soft and supple, because if it's going to stay, you don't want it to make the hood super stiff. If you're in a pinch, and I've done this and I'm going to show you, you could use paper. You could use a piece of copy paper. We could use just this little piece and then tear it away later. You will end up with a little bit of paper that's going to stay under the stitching, just like if you used a cutaway stabilizer. But it isn't going to be enough that it's really going to impact how the towel works. And all of the stitching and the backing is going to be encased inside the hooded towel, so nobody is going to know if you used anything or what you used. With that said, I'm going to do the first eye with nothing underneath, and we're going to see how it goes. If you're new to applique, I'm going to go over a few details. If you aren't, just fast forward a little bit because you're already going to know this. So you're going to want to use a foot that is designed for applique. This one, you can see it's really wide open in the front. It has lots of space back here so that the needle will be able to go back and forth into our zigzag stitch. And it's going to be really easy to see what we're doing and where we're going. There are other feet that could do zigzag, like this one. We could zigzag because it is wide open there, but you'll notice you really can't see what's going on as well because of all this plastic. So if we were zigzagging with this versus zigzagging with this, way difference in visibility. So my machine has an LCD screen where I am setting all of these things on here. If you have a different machine, you might just be turning a dial. There might be knobs that you're doing. So just look at your manual and figure out how you set zigzag and the width and the length. I set it to zigzag and it automatically went to 1.5 length. So you'll see it goes really ziggy, and 3 wide. Well, we want it to be a lot wider. So mine goes up to 7. I'm going to do like 6.5 to 7, so it's nice and wide. And then I want it to be a lot closer. And I have found a 0.75 or even smaller works, but when you're doing terry towel, you don't want it to be too close together or it's not going to move and it's going to be a mess. So get your settings how you want them. I highly recommend you set your zigzag and test on some spare towel before you work on your project. I'm going to start by putting my foot down, and my needle is set to go in on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to start sewing, and I want to make sure that the right-hand side is on the outside of my black. Yeah, it's really pulling. It's not moving very well because I don't have anything under here, and so it's struggling a little bit. So when you need to pivot, you want your needle to be down on the right side, so the outside of the shape that you're appliquing onto the white, and then you can just spin it so it's at an angle that is good to go again. And the reason I did the stitching so wide was because of all this fraying. We don't want the towel to be fraying when the hood is done and in use. So we want to make sure we're really securing that eyeball towel onto the eye spot towel. Now, before I work on this more, I'm just going to give it a little brush with the lint roller just to get some of that fuzz off. It's like dust. It has a mind of its own. So now we need to take this piece and adhere it to the back. So it's nice and see-through so we can see, like if you want it centered on the spot, you would put it there. If you want it a little bit towards the top, kind of like that placement. And then we're just going to press. Let that cool for a second. Make sure it is adhered nicely. Yep, good to go. Grab my trash bin and cut around that oval. We have the eyeball in the spot. So cute. Now it is time to take our towel and start laying out the face. On this towel, you can see there's definitely a right side and a wrong side. We're going to be putting the right side up, and now we need to find the center point on the long edge. So I'm just going to fold that in half. I'm going to take a clip, and I'm going to clip that right in the center. Now we also need to find this center on the horizontal lines. And a clip isn't going to work there, so I'm going to grab a pin. So this is our horizontal center, and why that is important is we need everything that we're appliquing in the ear to stay forward of that point, because the way we're going to make this hood is we're going to sew it, and it's going to fold in half like this, and then we're going to stitch this together. So all of the applique and anything else going on is going to be encased in between the two layers. So if you were to put any of your things past it, it would be on the back of the hood. So you can draw a line, but what I have found is easier. Take a piece of string or ribbon or whatever you want and put that straight and then hook it on the other side. So that is going to give you your center line. And the reason we want our center line is so that we know where to place our face. Now I've made a template, so if you want to, you can kind of place this right on there and just go like this, move the paper, or there are measurements. So you'll see we want the nose about 1/4 inch up from where that fabric is, that fabric edging. Then about 1/4 inch between the top of the nose and the eye. And this is all just to make sure the face stays forward on the hood enough that you're going to see it when a child is using it. And then this one, I think I said about 1/2 inch over. And you can, of course, do whatever you want, but this works, and I thought I would give you a guide if it was going to make your life easier. and then about 2 3/4 of an inch up from the finished edge. So now we need to press that onto this towel. Now we have to remember to take that paper backing off before we try and iron these pieces onto the towel. We have all the paper off, so now I'm just going to press these pieces on. We're going to try different kinds of stabilizer so I can show you how those work. We did no stabilizer, and you saw how that was a little bit of a struggle. So I'm going to put this water-soluble stabilizer behind these two. I'm just going to feel and make sure it is behind those two since I'm using kind of a small piece. And I'm just going to pin them in place. So when we do the nose, I'm going to use a piece of paper. So let's head to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew around this eye that has the water-soluble stabilizer behind it. It's a tongue twister. And you can see that's moving a lot more smoothly and a lot easier than when we sewed the black onto the white. I'm not having to pick up and pivot as often as I did for the other eye, and they are the same size. So that's a great indicator of what a difference putting a little bit of stabilizer behind does. So you can see we sewed right on that stabilizer, and this is going to go away when we wet it. Next, I'm going to use a piece of paper. This is what you use if you don't do a lot of applique and you just want to make a hooded towel, or it's 11 o'clock at night, you don't have any stabilizer left, and you will not be slowed down. So grab a piece of paper, put it underneath, and let's sew around the nose. Now the nose is done. We have some paper on the back. I'm just going to rip off the outside of that. You just want to rip really gently so that you're not pulling your stitches. So you're just going to pull as much paper off as you can. The outside and the inside. Some is going to stay under your stitches, but that's going to dissolve over time as you wash it, and it will be inside the 2 layers of the towel, so nobody is going to know. Now I have changed my thread to white, and we are going to sew around the eye spot. And this again has the water-soluble stabilizer under it. Now we have the face appliqued on the center of the towel. Now it is time to make the ears. We are making progress. Now it is time to make the ears, and I am going to put these chickens as the ear lining because the person I am making for loves cluck clucks. This is my chicken fabric from my Barn Quilts in Spring collection. We have the pattern, and I can either just fold this in half and cut it randomly, but because it's chickens and it's pretty vertical, I want to decide what chickens are in the ear. So I am going to place this template where I want it. So this guy to be a main guy on one of the ears. So I'm going to make sure that he is pretty much in the center and above the seam allowance. Put that down, and then you can either pin and cut that, or you can use a rotary cutter. So we have the lining for both ears. Now I do things a little bit differently, especially when I'm working with towels. I don't cut the towel with the template right away and then match those pieces because it is faster and a little bit easier to just pin these on top of the towel and cut later. Because you're going to have to clip the curve so that it turns right side out well, you're going to be cutting around this anyway, and as you can see, it makes a complete and utter mess. Then we're going to sew all the way around 1/4 inch from this outer edge and leaving the top section open. Now we just need to cut the towel to the shape of the ear, and I'm just going to use regular scissors along the straight parts, and then I'm going to grab my pinking shears for the curves. And you want to cut close to the stitching, but do not cut your stitching when using the pinking shears. But the closer you can get, the better the curve will be when you turn this right side out. Once you have them both cut out, then you're just going to turn them right side out. And then you're going to press, and you can top stitch around the edge if you'd like, or you can leave it like this. It is time to put them onto the hood or the hand towel. I'm going to look at this placement. The first towel that I did, the blue one, had the ears more up here, but they became too close to the point of the hood. So we need to move them down pretty much parallel to the eyes, maybe a teeny bit above. And if you are in my membership, you can get this placement diagram. So we want them to be like this when it is being worn. So when we pin and stitch these, we're going to do it in this direction. Over just a teeny bit from the edge of this eye and up maybe an inch. So about halfway over and halfway up. Just going to put a little pin there. And we're going to be zigzagging this on there. That will help this stop fraying and keep it on. And then it will flop down like that. I'm just going to place the other one at the same time. And I'm just going to put them so they're parallel. So just kind of looking, making sure this is about the same spot as that, and maybe an inch from the edge of that eye. Pin that, and now we will head back to the sewing machine and get these ears zigzagged on. Well, it's never fun when you click the wrong button and you don't actually record sewing, but I think you know how to zigzag that. So I basically did the zigzag pretty wide, just like we did with the applique. And then I'm just gonna cut any bigger pieces off. But now these ears are gonna be in a great place and they're gonna hang down beautifully on the hood. And we are going to fold the towel in half, matching the short ends, and make sure you have your ears folded towards the front. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to draw a line at the halfway mark between here and here, so that horizontal point that we had marked, but we just need to find again. This towel is basically 16 inches, so it's going to be at that 8-inch. And because it's terry towel, it's hard to get a lot of pens to work, so I'm going to use a chalk marker. It's just a piece of tailor's chalk, I think. And just use a color. So when I had a darker color, I used white chalk. For this one, I used blue. And I'm going to pin this, and we are going to sew on that line, starting at the folded side, all the way to this end. Now we are going to sew straight down the line that we just drew, but first I want to zoom in and show you what is going on with the presser foot. And if you have a walking foot, I would use a walking foot from here on out, because sewing layers of towels together does tend to get a little bit thick. Now hopefully you can see this, but the foot is kind of tilted. It's at an angle instead of flat. It works a lot better when things are flat and there is fabric under all of the feed dogs. So I am going to use leader fabrics. And if you're not familiar with leader fabric, it's basically just pieces of fabric. I just made these little folds and zigzag them together. And then I just pile as many as I need to be about the same height as whatever I am sewing. So I'm actually going to take 3. So see how that is now going to be straight. I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to put them under so that they are just butted up against the towel. And they're also on the feed dogs. That is going to keep your foot more level. It's going to be a lot better for your sewing machine, and you're going to be able to get started a lot faster. You don't sew into these leader fabrics, so you just make them and use them over and over again. They will just get pushed out as we move the towel and sew. So now I'm just going to sew this straight line. You don't have to sew over this super thick edge because we are going to be cutting that off. So I'm just going to back stitch a little bit and call it done. We are making progress. Sewing the hood is really 80 to 90% of the project when making a hooded towel. So I have stitched down this center line, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this back so that the face is going to be on the outside. See, it's just basically folding the towel in half along that stitch line, and then just get these edges lined up. So you're basically just getting that towel flattened properly. And I'm going to put some clips because we are going to sew right along that edge, right on top of that stitching that is already on the towel. And what this does is it makes a warmer hood because it's a double piece of towel, but it also hides all of this. So it's not going to touch or scratch anyone's head. If it doesn't match perfectly at the end, that is okay because we are going to be cutting off an inch or so there. The most important is to make sure that this part inside the hood, where the child's head will go, is lined up and nice and smooth. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch this closed. Those edges stitched closed. Now we're going to lay it flat and put it on your cutting mat so that the point and the center seam are on the same line so that we know we have it straight. And then we are going to cut 11 inches from the point to the bottom, basically cutting off this thick part and just making this nice and smooth. 11 inches is a minimum. If you want to and can go a little bit longer, go for it. Then the hood is going to work for your child until they are older, and then just use your rotary cutter, cut that off. Now it is time to put it onto the towel. So most bath towels have a front and a back. You can tell by the weave of this one. You can also tell based on where the tag is. We're going to want the front face up. So you're going to fold it in half, find that center point. And I'm just going to put a quick clip there so I know where that is. And then spread the towel out. It doesn't have to be completely flat everywhere. We just need it to be nice and flat where we are going to be adding the hood. Now I'm going to take the hood. So we're going to line this seam up with the center of the towel. And again, the towel is face up. And you want to pin the hood about 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the towel. And the reason we're going to do that is we're going to sew, then we're going to flip it forward and sew again to encase this raw edge of the hood. If you have a variety of pin lengths, you're going to want some of your longer pins because you're going through basically 3 layers of towel doing this. And be careful not to poke yourself as you're adding them. Now you want to match your thread to your towels so that these stitch lines are not going to be obvious. And use a walking foot if possible because you are going through quite a few thicknesses of towel. Now we have the hood sewn on. We are going to flip the towel so the inside of the towel is up, and we're going to push dog head up like that. So it's more the direction that it's going to be when in use. Now you'll see this part is still folded down, so we're simply going to fold that up so that it is flat. So we're folding it up like this. The hood will be down about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and we are going to pin that in place, and then we will just sew along here to attach the hood to the towel. Now there is a bit of a thick spot right there and right there. I'm going to go back and forth twice on each end just to really make sure that hood is nice and secure. The towel is done. Look at how cute that is. Now, if you've ever been on Pinterest or social media and seen them folded up really cute and ready to put in like a gift basket or a gift bag, I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to flatten your bath towel out. You're going to fold it up 1/3 of the way, and then another third so that that fold is at the same area as the top of the towel. Just make sure that is nice and smooth. I can't get all of it in the camera. You just have to trust me. Then you're going to fold one of the long ends in until the edge meets the edge of the hood, and then do the same on the other side. Now fold them in again until they meet in the center. They're basically on the edge, and then you can just kind of roll like this. And then you just pull the hood down so it looks cute. Now it doesn't stay super well because it's up top here and it's folded down. Depending on what kind of hooded towel you do, some people will do something where it looks good to put a ribbon around that and tie that, but it looks kind of weird across the nose of the dog, I think. So what I do is before I pull that up, I just take a piece of twine or ribbon or whatever you have handy and tie it together towards the top so that it will be covered when you pull that hood down. That's keeping it in place. If you're putting it in a gift bag or a basket, that is going to be fine. If you want it to be more secure, I would put like a safety pin here, a safety pin here, and then maybe one here.
Is it a quilt? Or is it a pillow? It's both. It's called a Quillow. This is an easy and very beginner-friendly quilting project that is so handy. Kids love it. It's great for a picnic blanket, an emergency blanket, or pillow that like folds up and contains itself in your car. So many ways to use this. So let me show you first how it works. I'm using the Crayon Colors of Kindness fabric from Riley Blake Designs. I chose the crayons for one side and the orange pattern for the other side. Just love it. I did put the pocket on the crayon side, but if I was to do it again, I would put this pocket on the orange side because I feel like the crayon side, if it's for kids, which crayons usually are, is usually going to be the side that they play on and lay on. So unless they really want to like stick their feet in there for some reason, it might be better to have the pocket on the other side. But it still looks great. It blends right in. So it's not a fail. I'm just telling you that because for my next one, I will do it a little bit differently. So let me show you how to fold it, and then I will show you how to make it. Okay, let's get started. So you're going to take the side that has the pocket and you're going to put it down on your floor, workspace, bed, wherever you're going to fold it up. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold it about 1/3 of the way in, and it just folds very nicely because it'll catch at the edge of that pocket. Then you're going to take the other side and you're going to fold that in as well. So now we have it folded in thirds, and you can teach kids to do this. I made one of these for my son when he was little, and he loved it, and he was so proud that he could put it all together by himself. Now, the pocket is down here, so we're gonna start at the other end, and we're gonna fold and fold until we're right up against the tip of that pocket. And then we're gonna fold it one more time. So now we have the pocket on this side, the quilt's all folded on this side. Now we're just gonna turn it inside out. And this is why it's super important to reinforce these corners, especially if you're gonna let kids do this themselves, because those corners are gonna have some wear and tear. But I show you how to do that in the video, don't you worry. And the first time you do it, you're gonna be like, Tara, I don't think this works. But I promise you it does, and you'll get better at it. So you start to push it in, and then what I like to do is just kind of pull that pocket out, just like you're flipping any kind of sewing project. Get my hand in there and push out those corners so that that space is really open and we're not trying to open it as we shove the folded up quilt in there. Okay, so my quilt's about here right now, pillow's there, and then you're just going to get the rest of the quilt put in there, and you're just going to arrange it so that it is nice and flat. And now you have a pillow. It's all just going to be straight quilting. You'll need some threads if you want to do your threads to match, and I'm going to show you how and when to change all that as we get into the project. So let's get started. Definitely want to pre-wash your fabric because you're going to be putting them in and out of the wash, so that's really important. Here's what we're going to need to make the Quillow. I have cut 2 pieces of fabric. I got 1.5 yards of the orange and 2 yards of the crayons. So this is cut to 41 inches wide by 53 inches long, pretty much as long as I could make it after pre-washing the fabric. Then I did the same size in batting. Now, to talk about batting, it's important as you buy batting to pay attention to how far apart you can do your quilting for your batting. And usually the cheaper the batting, the closer together your lines need to be, because if you don't quilt it enough, the batting will fall apart. So I've seen batting that has to be sewn every 3 to 4 inches, all the way up to 10 inches. So take that into account when you're deciding how you're going to be quilting any quilted project. And also make sure as you're storing scrap pieces that you somehow label your batting so you know what you need to do so that it stays in shape. Then I have done 15-inch squares from the 2 sides that will be the pocket and also the batting. So I'm going to put the quilt part aside for now, and we're going to prepare our pocket. And you're going to prepare the quilt the same way, but at least this I can get onto the camera. So we're going to put the fabrics right sides together, get those evened up, make sure those edges are all lined up. And then we're going to put the batting right on top. So we're making a little sandwich so that when we turn it right side out, the right sides of the fabric will be out and this batting will be sandwiched in the middle. And then you're just going to pin or clip all the way around, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew around the square, which will become the pillow pocket with a 1/4 inch seam, leaving space open to turn it, so 4 or 5 inches, and I'm going to double back and forth just to make sure we can get that turned without pulling any stitches. As I quilt the pillow pocket, I'm going to be using a navy blue top thread and a green bobbin so that the lines of the quilting aren't going to be super obvious. You can do colors that match your fabric, or you can do alternate, totally up to you. This is what I've chosen to do on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew across the very top edge, a 1/4 inch from the edge. Now you can see, you can't see that top stitch on the front really or the back because I coordinated that. Next, we're going to be doing some quilting. And you can have fun with it. You can do zigzags, you can do whatever you want, but I am just going to do some quick diagonal lines, and I'm going to use my secret weapon, which is painter's tape. I have it in a few different widths, and I'm going to use 2-inch. And what's beautiful about this is it's not going to leave a residue on your fabric, and you can just keep picking it up and moving it. I want to make sure the diagonal line is diagonal from corner to corner, which it wasn't quite. So I'm going to make the piece as big as the corners, and I'm going to put the tape down so that the corner is right in the middle, so basically at that 1 inch. Now I'm just going to sew on either side of this tape, and then I'm going to move the tape, and I will have even 2-inch lines, easy peasy. You can draw lines on there, but I have found this is so quick and easy, and I'm all about that. let's just get this Quillow done. And if you have one, I recommend a walking foot when you're doing any kind of quilting because it is a little bit thick with the 2 pieces of fabric and the batting in the middle, and that will help it not bunch up because it helps move the bottom and the top fabric at the same time. And I would also use a little bit of a longer stitch. I usually quilt with a 2.9 or 3.0 length stitch. Now I'm just going to line the tape up on the edge of the last stitch mark, press that down, and now I'm ready to sew exactly 2 inches away from my original stitching. As you get closer to the top, your tape is going to be much, much longer than you need it to be. So you do need to make sure it doesn't stick to your sewing machine as you're beginning to move forward, or it could mess up the evenness of your stitches. So I usually just keep a little bit here, the longer end back here where I can control it a little bit more, and then just keep going. And while 2 inches is right there, I'm not going to sew that because we're already going to be going around that corner, so it is really not needed. I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. Now we have the quilt pocket sewn together and quilted. This is what will be on the outside when it is all folded up, and this is what will be matching the main quilt when it is sewn together. So this is basically the same thing, the same process that we're going to do with the larger quilt. We're going to layer the 3 layers, then we're going to sew them together, flip it right side out, press it. We're going to sew all the way around the outside of the quilt, and then we're going to quilt it. Just make sure you're quilting close enough that your batting is going to do well and not bunch up and fall apart when you put this in and out of the wash. Now I have the quilt section sewn together front to back with the batting in the middle and stitched around the edge. And I'm not going to do the painter's tape guidelines for quilting on this just because it's big and it would be quite a bit of tape to do that. So instead, I'm going to use a ruler and a fabric pen. I'm going to mark it on the orange side because pen is just going to show a lot better than on the navy. So I'm going to take the longest ruler that I have so I can do the longest line at a time without having to move it, 36-inch long and 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to go the width of the ruler. And I've decided that since the angled lines that I did on the pillow pocket wouldn't line up perfectly if I did diagonals on this, and because it's much easier to draw lines when you're going parallel to the edges, that I'm just going to have it go in a different direction so it looks like it was intentional and not like it just didn't quite line up. And I'm using a heat erasable pen, which I love because it shows really, really well. And then once we do our stitching, I'm just going to iron over it and it will disappear like magic. So even when it's darker in some spots and lighter in others, it does not matter at all. Now I just took the easy way and started 4 inches off of an edge, but you'll notice that this isn't going to be 4 inches. So if you really want it to be perfectly symmetrical, you could start with a middle line and then work off the middle line to each side. But I've decided since this is a project, a kid's project, they are never going to notice. And so I'm just going to do what is a little bit easier for me. I'm going to turn it and I'm going to do the same thing going the other direction so that our quilting on this is going to be squares. I'm going to turn this around and start my lines from the top so that if there's a skinnier one, it's going to be at the bottom of the Quillow and not at the top. And if your lines start to get a little bit fainter than you'd like, just move slower or go back and forth with your pen. I find if I move too fast, they're very faint. Now I have an orange thread in the top and a navy blue in the bobbin to match the crayon fabric. I'm also going to wear my quilting gloves because they have the silicone grip on there and they will make my hands, it'll make it easier to help move the fabric and keep it straight because it will help grip that fabric and help me with my quilting process. And I am going to start by going the length of the quilt with the center line. So I'm not starting from an end. I'm going to go the length of the quilt in the center, and then I'm going to find about the center, the other direction as well. So I get a big quilted X that will help keep the fabric from shifting too much as I quilt. And the main thing to remember as you move it through is to keep it as flat as possible where you're coming from and as you're going. All right, we got the long way done. Now I'm going to do a center line going in the opposite direction just to really anchor the fabric because we've sewn all the way around the edges. We've gone down the center lengthwise. Now we're going to go down the center on the width. I like to hold both the bobbin thread and the top thread while I start and as I knot that thread so that one of them doesn't kind of get sucked down and create a big knot. So along the rest of these lines. And if you don't sew perfectly on the line, don't worry about it because again, you're going to iron this at the very end and that line will disappear and no one will know exactly where you drew it. We are in the home stretch. Now we have the quilt all done and quilted in both directions every 4 inches. We have the pillow pocket and we are going to place it with the crayon side up so that when it's open, the crayon side looks like one big piece of fabric. And then when it's folded up, this is going to be on the outside. So the top is the end that we stitched across. You'll notice these sides don't have any stitching yet. We're going to do that next. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the center of the quilt. So you're just going to fold it in half. Keep your finger on the center. I'm going to put a clip there. So I know where the center is, and then I'm going to get that flat again. Now I'm going to fold this in half also, find the center, line that center up, and clip it. I went up a teeny bit from the edge, so I didn't line up these edges of the pocket and that because it's going to be a bit thick if we try and do all of that together. So it's better to put it up a little bit. So if you were doing a quilt where you used regular binding, you would put it up from the binding. But for this, I'm just going to put it up about 1/4 inch. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these 3 sides. And you're really going to want to reinforce up here. This part stays open because when we fold it, it flips and that's where everything goes in. So this needs to be nice and reinforced so that it's not going to rip. I recommend nice long pins if you have them for this because you are going through 4 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting. And sometimes a little bit more because when we sewed this together and flipped it, remember there's like 4 layers there too. And if your fabric is directional, you want to make sure you're paying attention and that you are pinning this to the bottom of your quilt and not the top. So you'll notice all the crayons are pretty much going in the same direction. I'm not pinning this on the top where then the pillow ones are going to look mostly opposite of what the rest of the quilt looks like. It's really hard to see where this is. So here is the edge. So we're going to start by going back and forth and then creating a little triangle, just really small, to really reinforce this because there's going to be a lot of pressure on this top edge as you fold and unfold and as kids are going to be using this. So because we have no access to the bobbin thread at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to put the needle down and we're going to pull it up and then you're just going to tug and you're going to pull that bobbin thread up through the fabric. See how I did that? So just like you would pull a bobbin thread up if you didn't have anything down, you're just pulling it up through here so that we're still going to be able to hold both the top and the bottom thread when we do a knot. And that is going to reduce the gnarly knots that you sometimes get on the back of a project. I've also switched my bobbin and top thread colors because now the bobbin thread needs to be orange to go with the back and the navy is going to be on top. So let's get this pocket sewn on. So I go down about 1 inch and then I'm going to backstitch all the way to the top again. I'm going to lift my needle and I'm going to twist and I'm just going to go like 3 or 4 stitches along the top. I'm going to backstitch again, forward one more time. 1, 2, 3, lift my needle. We're going to pivot and then we're going to go at an angle back to where we started sewing and then continue down. So that's just really reinforcing that top edge and we'll do it again when we get to the other top side. If you want to really reinforce it, you can backstitch and forward again on this part. I just remember how hard my son was on these, so I want this thing to stay together and not rip apart. And you'll notice I'm sewing not quite to the edge, so about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the pocket. And now we're to the next top, so we're going to do that reinforcement triangle.
In today's tutorial, it's all about kids and it's all about the coloring. Or if you like to color, you go for it. Make one of these for yourself. There should be no age limit on these. I apologize. With a 1/4 yard of fabric, you can make 2 of these holders that holds a 3x5 little notepad that you can find pretty much anywhere and 6 crayons. Or you can make a really long one that holds 16 crayons and the notepad if you use the entire 1/4 yard for one project. So I'm going to walk you through how to do these little ones. And then if you want to make it bigger, you're just going to double it up and have a lot of fun. Let's get started with our materials. This is a pretty simple project, so you don't need very much. Once we have this all sewn together, you're going to need a memo book. I use these 3x5 inches and then some crayons, but we can set those aside for now. You're going to need fabric, rotary cutter, pins or clips, 2-inch piece of hook and loop, also known as a Velcro, a piece of fabric that is 5.5 by 1.5 to make our closure tab, and then my favorite, heat erasable pen for marking those lines. You can also use a chalk marker or a pencil, totally your choice, but I like how easy these are to see when you draw on the fabric. And that is going to come off with heat. So once you hit the iron to that, it is completely gone. No one will ever know it was there. And then also I like to use a little square ruler. You can use any kind of ruler that you have, but I like to use this one to do my markings. It's a great size and I will show you that in a little bit. Now this is a 1/4 yard of fabric. I cut it the full width of fabric, then I cut the selvage off one end and I cut it in half. This way, we can make 2 of these little crayon carriers out of 1/4 yard of fabric, making it a really economical thing to use if you're making multiple. Because this is a tutorial for the easiest way to do this, you definitely want to use a solid, just a random print like dots or things like stripes, things like that, or something that's not going to look super directional. And here is why. This would be so cute for a little crayon thing, right? When you sew it together, this is going to be the outside, and then we're going to fold this up to put all the crayons and everything, and the inside is going to be completely upside down. This is possible, but that's going to be a whole nother thing. And the first step is to just take this fabric and fold it the long way, right sides together, and then you can either clip or pin these 2 sides, and then we're going to do the same thing with this little closure. We're just going to fold that in half and we're going to sew down these 2 sides. And this one, I'm just going to finger press, which basically means push it with your fingers. And I'm just going to put 1 pin in that. Now we're going to go sew these together. I'm just going to sew down each side with a 1/4 inch seam. The next step is to turn both of these right side out. Now, I want to cut off a teeny bit of the fabric right there, but make sure you do not cut your stitching. So it's kind of like cutting a corner, but you're only cutting one part because we did a fold instead of stitching that other side. And this one, because it's big, really easy to turn right side out. We're going to grab the ironing board in a minute. This one, because it's so skinny, this is 1 inch in between the stitching. It is a bit harder to turn right side out, but I'm going to show you my tip. So the first thing is you want to turn it so that the seam is folded down, right? You don't want to put too much strain on that seam. And then you can just see what you can do with your fingers. But I also like to grab tweezers. And so I will put the tweezers as far in there as I can. I got it. See how it's pinched in there? Now I'm going to keep that pinched and I'm just going to pull that out like that. Okay, now we have to get the corners out. So I'm going to use this handy dandy tool, turning tool in a cute little Riley Blake bird. And the key is just to kind of run it along the seam and be really gentle at those corners because you don't want to push through the fabric. Now, if you don't have something like this, you can use other tools. So you could use a pen as long as you don't have it open because you don't want to be drawing on the inside of your fabric. If you're really careful, You can also use this pointy tip from the cleaning brush that came with your sewing machine. But you have to be really, really gentle because it's quite pointy and it's going to be pretty easy to poke through that fabric, but that does work. You can also use a chopstick, basically anything with a little bit of a point can be used to push it out, but you just want to be gentle. But look at what great points we have on that. Next step involves a little bit of ironing. You're going to push these seams out. We want to have it nice and flat and the seams to be on the edge. And then this is just a fold, but we do want to press that. So everything is nice and flat. The next step, we're going to press this raw edge under about 3/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. This is one of those beautiful projects. If you do a 1/2 inch, you're going to be totally fine. So once we get that finger pressed, we're just going to take the iron and press that closed. Now we're going to press this one as well. We don't have to fold this end under because it is going to get tucked in here. So yay for that. We just have to make sure it's nice and flat and even. So while we have the iron on, we're going to press this up, which is going to be the start of making our pockets. And we are going to fold it up 2 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do, and don't iron on your quilting rulers, but it's great to do this. I'm going to put my ruler up here, and then I'm just going to fold this up and see what happens. Well, that's too far. So I'm going to line this edge up with 2 3/4, and then I'm just going to push the ruler until I can feel that the ruler is at this fold. Take my ruler out, and as long as these sides are straight, you're going to have a nice consistent 2 3/4 inches all the way across. So I'm just going to press this in place. Now we're going to take our hook and loop. So we have the scratchy side, which is the hook, and the soft side, which is the loop. And they, as you know, stick together very nicely, and kids can do it. So the soft side is going to go on the back of the crayon container, and the scratchy / hook side is going to go on our tab. And the reason for that, let me show you the one that's done, is that if someone has this laying on their lap, you don't want the scratchy part of the Velcro on their lap, because if they're wearing something knit, that could attach and mess up their clothes. So really important to put the soft side on the back and the scratchy side over here, because that's always going to be face up when they are using this pack. It's the little things, right? So I'm just going to head over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this onto the tab, and then I will be right back and show you how to figure out exactly where that goes on the back of this fabric. You want to use a pretty small stitch length. I'm going to be using a 1.8 because this is a small piece and we're just going to be going around it in a box. You also want to make sure you pull up your bobbin thread, because the front of the closure tab is where the bobbin thread is going to be. So if you skip this step and end up with one of those little bird nests at the beginning of your stitching, it is going to show. So let me remind you how to do that. You're going to put it pretty close to the folded edge, because this raw edge is going to go inside the crayon pack. So I'm just going to put a clip right here just to keep it in place. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, let's do it. So you're going to hold your top thread. You're going to put your presser foot down. You're going to lower your needle, still holding this thread, lift your needle, give it a little tug, and grab that bobbin thread. This is going to stop it from getting sucked under when you get started. So then you're going to put both of these threads under the foot, and you're going to hold them tight while you start. So do like 2 to 3 stitches, keep holding them, and then do 2 to 3 backwards. So that locks those in place. Now these should not get sucked under anymore, so you can let that go. And now we are just going to sew all the way around this loop to attach it to the closure. And you can see we didn't have a big old bird's nest back there. Just need to cut that off. Now, if you didn't want this to show, you could just match your bobbin thread to the main color of your fabric. I'm gonna show you how to get the soft side on the back of the crayon pad. The next step is to decide where our closure goes and then make sure that the loop gets lined up properly on the back of the case. But before we do that, I want to show you one other thing that I forgot to mention when I just folded that up and ironed it. This is the open end and this is folded. So the closure is going to go here because it gets tucked in. That means that this notepad is going to go on the left. And that is because it's going to roll up nicely and close when the notepad is on the opposite side of the closure. This is the one that I did that way. So you just flip, flip, perfect, right? This was the second one I did. This was the first one I did when I hadn't thought through that part, and I put the closure on the same side as the notepad. Well, if you flip, flip, that doesn't work. So you end up having to like do this really weird flip. Yeah, it's just not good. So the closure is always the opposite side of the notepad. Now, being a right-handed daughter of two left-handed parents, I want to tell you how to do it the opposite way. If you want this to be on the right, all you do is you put your opening on the left and you would fold it up in that direction. That way your closure's over here, your notepad's over here. So now you know how to do it both directions. We're gonna stick with what I already did. Find the center, and you can either measure with a ruler or you can just use your grid if you have it on your mat. So I'm going to fold this back and I'm just going to place this in here, 2 1/4 inches. So we have like 2 1/4 on either side. Have it in about a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to pin that in place. And I'm going to do it from both sides just so that it stays straight. Now we're going to turn it over. So this is the back. And you're going to measure 2 3/4 inches from this side. So I'm just going to put this ruler down, and you can draw a mark or you can just leave your ruler sitting on there. And that is what you're going to use to line up the edge of the loop. Now I'm going to keep that there, and just to make sure I have it lined up well, I'm going to fold this back, making sure this edge and this edge are lined up. And I'm going to very quickly realize, nope, it's too far up. So I'm just going to scooch it down so that that is all lined up, so that it's going to hit very nicely when you go to close. Hold that down, fold that back, pick this up because the folded part is under there, or we could have just moved that back, but it's easier to see that way. Now I'm going to put a pin in here so I know exactly where I want this to be. And I do kind of put it to one side so I can start sewing here. And now I'm just going to go sew that on just like we sewed the other half on. We have our closure pinned. We have our loop on the back. So we're going to keep it where the hook is facing up. We're going to fold this back up. And the next step is to sew all the way down from here down to here. We're going to go across the bottom and up to here. You know what's no fun? When you forget to hit record. I forgot to hit record as I was sewing that, but thankfully it was something simple, so I think you can get it. So I started up here, and then I doubled back here, and I sewed all the way around, and then I went over the edge and back just to reinforce that edge. So now we can remove this pin. And some people ask, why do I sew on the bottom since it is a fold? Partly just to finish it and give it a little bit more stability, because I don't see the need to put any kind of interfacing in here because the notepad and the crayons keep it pretty solid, but this does help with that a little bit. And it also helps the crayons just kind of stay up a little bit, because you need this fold to be big enough to keep your notepad in place, but not so big that you can't see the crayons. So it can be a little bit of a quandary. Now it is time to do our markings. That means you need to make a decision. Do you want your notepad to be stored like this, where the whole notepad is in the pocket? Or do you want just this back cardboard to be in the pocket and the rest to be out so that it's just easy for the kids or whoever to flip through that? Totally personal preference. If you want it this way, you're going to have the cardboard in here, and then you're just going to take your ruler, go maybe 1/8 of an inch past the cardboard. And then you're going to just draw a line down the pocket so you know where to sew to make this pocket for the notepad. If you had made a different choice, you can see this stitch line wouldn't work. If you wanted it to be totally tucked in, you're going to want to sew 3.5 for a snug fit or 3 3/4 for an easier fit from the seam, not the edge, because if you go from the edge, it might be a little bit too tight to get your notepad in. So this is our first stitch line that we're going to do. Now we are going to make little pockets for the crayons, just like this. And for that, I want you to start from this edge because sometimes there's not quite enough space in between the notepad to put an extra crayon, and you want to make sure if you have any extra weird amount of space, you want it near the notepad, not over here. I just turn it over, and again, you're going to start your marking from the seam line, not from the edge. And you're going to mark 1 inch. This is what 1 inch looks like. It's nice and roomy. If you want to get more crayons in there and you want it to be a little bit more of a snug fit, you could do like 3/4 of an inch, but I like to do 1 inch myself. And then you're just going to draw 1 inch increments off of the previously drawn line and see how easy it is to see these lines because they're made with this pen. Okay, so see, we have a weird amount. No crayons fitting in there, but we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here. So this is why you measure from this side for your notepad and this side for your crayons. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to remember to hit record, and I'm going to show you how we are going to finish putting these stitch lines, and then all that will be left is adding our notepad and our crayons. I put 2 pins just to make sure this stays nice and flat as I'm sewing these lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew in U shapes just to save time. If you want to, you can start and stop on each individual line, but I'm going to start up here, go down. I'm going to go right along that same stitch line and then go back up. So then I'm only starting and stopping a few times. And each time you start, you definitely want to pull up that bobbin thread because your bobbin is going to be on the outside of this project. And you're going to want to go beyond the fold, just like 2 stitches, just again, to reinforce it when people are putting crayons in and out. Now you'll notice I'm about to sew up onto the loop a little bit, which is totally fine. But that's why we put that loop on before we sewed these channels. Now we need to get these lines off of the fabric. And all you need to do is heat up your iron. Look at that. I'm like a child. This amuses me every time. See, all that is left is to add our notebook and our crayons. So we had decided to have it go like that, and that's perfect size. Then you just roll it up and attach that Velcro, and it is ready to go. Let me know in the comments below how you would use these. I'm very, very curious. And if you make and post any of these online, be sure to tag me at Artist Tara Reid.
Let's start by talking about supplies, best case scenario, and how to pinch hit if you need to, which I need to in this case. So we're going to make this cute little pom-pom ball for the back of the hood, little Santa ball, out of a washcloth. So you're going to need 1 washcloth. You're going to need red and white thread. We're going to need fabric scissors, rotary cutter, rulers. Then I'm going to be using this 9-inch circle ruler by Lori Holt, because then I can just use my rotary cutter to create the circle to make the pom-pom ball. But if you don't have that, you can use a plate. You can use a little smaller, a little bigger, but this is pretty much what you're going to get if you use a 9-inch circle. Now, back to the perfect world and other world scenario. Red bath towel and red hand towel, white hand towel, white washcloth. That's the perfect world. If you can't find a red hand towel, get 2 red bath towels. That's what we're going to need to get this done. It is going to be quick and easy, and it is going to be so incredibly cute. Let's get started. Step 1, we need to cut our towels into the pieces that we need to make this hooded towel. So I'm going to start by cutting the washcloth. If you have a rotary mat, you want to use that. This cute pink one is by Sue Daly from Riley Blake Designs. Then I'm going to be using the circle ruler from Lori Holt. But again, you can use a plate if you don't have this. Place your hand flat down, press that down, and you're just going to cut, 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 cut. When your wrist gets so tweaked that you can't move it and stay along that edge again, you're just going to turn this. I'm going to get that all the way around. See how easy that was? Now we're going to take our white circle and we're going to do our gathering stitches. Now, normally I would do this in white, so it's not going to show, but then you will have no clue what I'm doing. And it's actually kind of hard to see. I'm going to use red so that you can really see what I'm doing. I'm going to go halfway around and then I'm going to go the other half. Sometimes people will gather, they'll sew all the way around, but I find that to be a little hard to get it to work all the way around, and sometimes my thread breaks, so I like to go halfway. First, we need to pull up the bobbin thread. You want both of your threads nice and long on both sides of your gathering. I'm going to go about 1/4 inch from the edge and I'm just going to stitch halfway around. Now, do not cut your thread here. Lift your foot, lift your needle if it is down, and now you need to pull these threads so you have about 10 to 12 inches again. Put those threads on that half. Now we're going to make sure this is nice and long for starting, and we're going to do the other half of the circle. And you want to make sure, again, that you have long strings on both sides of where you want to gather. Now we're going to gather this. Let me show you our goal. This is the one that I've already done. I want it to be a washcloth because you're going to put this through the wash. You want it to dry nicely. I gathered and then I stitched this together just so it makes this big old clump of a Santa ball. So the first thing you need to do is you need to organize these threads. So there's 2 for that half, 2 for that half. Do the same on the other side, just so you know what you're pulling. And you know, if you want to, you could do 2 separate colors so that it's a little bit easier to figure out which threads go with which half. Now you're just going to grab the top thread from one side, doesn't matter which, and you're just going to gently pull, and you're going to gather that washcloth. And I usually pull until it stops, and then I push the washcloth along the string just to move that gathering around. So I kind of do that as far as I can. It's gathering pretty nicely. So now I'm going to take the top thread from the other side just to finish. See, having the multiple threads just makes it go a little bit quicker and easier. So that half is pretty well gathered. I'm going to do the same thing for the other half of the circle. So now we have that pretty gathered. We have all these long threads. So now I want to figure out which ones are from the left and which ones are from the right. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to tie them together. Did a knot, so that brought these sides together. Now we just need to pull this stuff in a little bit more. So what I decided to do was I have some 3-inch long soft sculpture needles that have a really big head to them. And so I can take this long batch of threads, put that through this needle, and then I'm just going to sew just to pull it all into one spot. So you're basically just getting all that gathering mushed together into the center. And it doesn't have to be done neatly because this is all going to be sewn onto the towel. Trim the extra thread, and we're going to set this aside until we have the rest of the hooded towel together. This will be the last thing that we sew on. Next, we are going to take our white towel and we are going to cut this to 16.5 inches by 5 inches. This is a very linty project because you're going to have a lot of raw edges of towel, but don't worry, we're going to use zigzagging, or get out your serger if you have one to serge some edges, and then always make sure you clean your machine after you do a project like this because it will probably have more than a usual amount of lint inside. And this is going to be extra. So if you wanted to make little washcloths out of that, or if you were going to make 2 Santa hooded towels, you have enough with 1 hand towel to make 2. Now you're going to zigzag down 2 of the short and 1 of the long sides. We're not going to do all 4 sides because we're going to be cutting a curve off of the top. So we would have cut all that stitching off. Next, we need to cut a piece out of our towel. Now, if you have the hand towel, you're going to use your hand towel, but because I don't, I'm pinch hitting and I'm cutting it out of a big towel. And for this, we need a piece that is 16.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And because we're going to be adding the white around the front edge, we're going to work from all raw edges. I have that fold lined up on that grid line so that I know I'm going straight. Towels are not the straightest things. So you always want to work from the fold, and then we'll trim accordingly. Nice and thick, which makes it a little bit harder to cut, but we've got this. I'm gonna grab my lint roller. This is great for getting threads off your ironing board, and when you have really fluffy things like towels or minky fabric that you're cutting, it helps to get it off of your cutting mat. Now I've changed to a zigzag foot, and I'm going to zigzag down the 2 short ends and across one long end of the red hood. Now I'm using a pretty wide zigzag, 4.8, and not a super short, because we're not doing applique on this, we're just securing the edge. So I'm doing a 3 length, and then I want my needle to go over the edge. This is the perfect job for a serger if you have one, but I don't. So I'm going to be doing the zigzag. You can do whatever works for you. And keep pushing that away from your sewing machine as the fuzz comes off, because you want as little as possible to get sucked down in there. Our next step is to make the Santa white border go onto this hood. If you want to just keep it simple, you're going to leave this straight. So then you're just going to fold that under so that the raw edges are under there. You might want to zigzag them first just for extra security, and then you're going to sew straight across. I don't know. I wanted to make my life a little more complicated, so this will be a little bit cuter. So I'm going to make a curved line so it looks like Santa's hat. So this template is available in the pattern that I am selling on Etsy. You don't have to buy it. You can do it the straight way, but if you want this curve and all the written directions, you can go find that there. The link will be in the description below. So I've printed out this template. I'm just going to cut it in half right along that line. Now we have to match these dashed lines where it has the letter A. So I'm going to cut one of them on the line. And then we're going to tape that together, matching that curve. Now I'm going to take the white, these are the zigzag sides. This is the cut side, just raw, ready to roll. Going to line these edges up, and then we're going to pin that and cut that curve. So our next step is to decide how you want to put the white trim onto the hood. So the first thing you're going to do is have it so you can see about half an inch to an inch of the red, so you can see how high this is going to be. And you're going to decide how big you want this part to be on the hood. Do you want it to be really pretty small? Do you want it to be bigger? Totally up to you how you want to do this. So I'm going to do it like that. So I'm going to line those edges up. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to fold this down. So we're going to stitch straight across here, but not catch that. I'll show you that part in a minute. I also want to stitch closer to this just to really secure this on here. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to take a heat erasable pen or draw a line about a half an inch from that fold, just so I have a second place to secure this onto the towel. And that line will erase when I iron. Any heat will get rid of that line, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Now we're going to flip that, because we don't want to stitch that part yet. We're going to zigzag that onto the front. This is just securing this to the back. I'm just going to pin this together, and then we're going to sew here and here. Now for these 2 lines of stitching, I'm going to use white thread to match the white and a bobbin thread to match the red, because that will be on the back side. And now I'm sewing down the line that we drew to connect the white closer to the edge of the red. Now the white is secured onto the red. Now I'm going to turn this over. We'll get all that off later too. And I'm going to bring the curve forward. And if you don't do the curve, that's totally fine. You're going to use the same procedure, but this will be straight. And I'm going to pin this on. Now I'm going to zigzag to secure this together. So I'm doing a 3.2 wide and about a 1.7 long. You will have to help move your fabric along because you're doing 2 layers of towels, and my zigzag doesn't work with a walking foot, so I'm assuming yours might not either. And I'm still using the red bobbin and the white top thread. Now we're going to take our hood and we're going to do it right sides together. So the curved sides together, we're going to fold this in half. And now we're just going to sew down the back, and that is going to make the back of the hood. And we've already zigzagged that edge, so we just need to do a straight stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. Our hood is done. We're going to connect it to the towel, and then we're going to put the pom-pom that we made. Remember, it's been a while. We're going to put that right on there, and this is going to be so adorable. The next step is to sew our hood onto our towel. So this is the seam we just sewed. And then this edge is going to sew right inside the edge of the towel. Let me show you how we're going to set that up. So this is the big bath towel, and I have it folded in half long ways. So this is the center mark of the long side of the towel. It's almost like we're making a cape. Now we're going to match that center mark with this seam that we just sewed for the back of the hood. I'm going to fold this part back just a teeny bit so that I can place the hood right inside, and we're going to overlap it about a 1/2 inch. And now we are going to pin the hood to the towel. We want this edge to be on the inside of the towel, and the outside is just going to look super cute. So the outside is going to have the sewn edge of the bath towel over top of the hood, just like that. And then when you get to the center, you can just fold it over and pin the other side. So as you can see, you can get this hood to lay nice and flat. So it's going to be nice and easy to sew, as long as you get it pinned on evenly over the towel. If you have a walking foot, this would be a good time to use it because we do have a bit of bulk to sew over, especially on this white part. Now I'm going to start before the white section so that the thread can get knotted and we can get up to speed, and then we're just sewing across it instead of trying to do any knotting and everything right on that thickness. Make sure you don't sew over your pins because that's a sure way to break a needle. And then either have your stiletto or turning tool or your scissors ready, because even with the walking foot, you might have to help this along a little bit. So now we're going to sew right along this edge all the way down and just past the other end of the white. Once you get off that white, it gets a lot easier. And I am using red thread for both the top and the bobbin because we're going over red and we don't want any of the stitching to show. It will show a little bit on the white, but overall it's red to red. Now I'm going to turn it over because you'll see we have all of this towel that's not attached to the hood. So I'm going to sew right along the edging of the towel. So we're going to have double stitching to keep this hood nice and secure. And even with the walking foot, I had to pull a little bit to get it to go because it was just going up such a big lump of towel. That's a technical term. And as you go, just keep adjusting the towel and the hood so that this part you're about to sew on stays flat. Oh, we're almost done. The hood is on the towel. I love the curve. Straight will be really cute too, but I love the curve. Now we need to take our little washcloth pom-pom ball and attach it to the point of the hood. I have taken this long needle again, and I have doubled the thread and tied it in a knot. And because this is a washcloth, it's gonna wash and dry great in the laundry. You're just gonna have to poof it out a little bit when it's on your child's head. And you're gonna need to make sure that you get it sewn on pretty securely so it's not going to come off in the wash. And I'm using white this time so that no matter where the stitching is on this little ball, it is not going to show. So my goal here, I do have a goal. My goal here is to just kind of keep going around and kind of sewing a little circle around the base of the washcloth, attaching it to the hood each stitch. I think every baby celebrating Christmas needs one of these. Okay, so I'm back past where I started. So I'm just going to put a couple really short, tight stitches and then knot this. That's it. It's done. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make something to help keep germs off of your toddlers and your little kids' fingers when you're at the store. This is a shopping cart handle cover. It is made with 2 pieces of fabric and a long strip of hook and loop tape. The name brand is Velcro, and it has that sound that everyone will recognize as you pull it apart. So basically, you put the hook on one side, the loop on the other side, you fold it up, throw it into your purse, and when you get to the store, you just wrap it around that handle. Great for a baby shower gift, great things to sew and sell, and just a fun way to get fewer germs on your child's hands as you are out and about. I'm going to show you how to take 10-inch pre-cuts and make these. So this one was made with 2. You can see there's a little piece on the sides and a bigger section in the center. This one I used some scraps, so it's 1, 2, 3 different fabrics, 2 on each end.
You can also make them with solid fabric. So if you have yardage or something else, you could just do colors, you can do something fun. But because I do have this Thomas and Friends from Riley Blake Designs, we are going to make one with that. This is the part that will be touching the handle of the shopping cart. So nobody's going to see it. So it can be anything. It can be any old scrap that you have, and you're going to cut it anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 inches high by 15 inches wide. And then you're going to make your outside the same. So whether you're using one fabric or scrappy fabric, you're going to get that to that same dimension. Now, I tested these sizes. I made this one out of 6.5 inch by 15 inch fabric. And I made this one out of 5.5 inch by 15 inch fabric. And then I took it to Walmart and I tested it on the cart. I prefer the 5.5 because it fits more snugly. But this one works just as well. And if I were to go to a store that had a slightly fatter handle, then I would want this one. So I would go somewhere in between. I would not go any smaller than 5.5 inches. I certainly wouldn't go any bigger than 6.5. So you can test and decide. Then you're going to also need a piece of hook and loop. This one's 13 inches long. And the reason I do it the entire length is because the cart is going to have sections where you can't get it completely wrapped. The handle isn't just open all this direction, so it's not like we know exactly where you need to put this. So putting it all the way along works great. So I've cut this to be the inside. So I'm going to put that aside. And now I'm just going to grab 2 pieces. I'm going to put the trains in the center, and then I'm going to put these cute tracks with the little location bubbles on either side. Now they are both directional, so I want to make sure I have them going in the same direction. And these are 10 by 10. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm turning it on its side because we're going to cut for this part, for that direction. And I'm going to cut this to be 5.5 inches by 10 inches. So this is going to be the center. And then for this, you can either just cut it in half, sew it on both sides, and then trim it to the 15 inches wide. Or if you want to be more deliberate about how much extra you have for another project, you can trim this to 2.75 or 3 inches. I like to do 3 inches just in case I'm a little bit off on my seams. But at the same time, if your handle cover isn't exactly 15 inches wide, nobody's going to know but you. You just want to make sure it basically covers where your child is going to grab, which is usually within that 15-inch span. I want to make sure I'm paying attention to the directionality. So these little location bubbles, the points should be down towards me, like towards the wheels of the train. So you don't want one going this way and one going this way. I mean, not that a child's going to notice, but it's a detail I would notice. You're going to put these right sides together on each side, and then I'm just going to do 2 quick clips, and then we are going to sew down both of these with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we are going to press that open. Now we have our 2 pieces of fabric, so we are going to place them right sides together, and then clip or pin. I'm a big clipper, especially for things that don't need to be super precise. I do a lot more pinning if I'm doing quilt blocks, but for a project like this, I find clips to be nice and fast and they never poke me. Are you a clipper, a pinner? Have you tried clips before? Let me know in the comments if you have a preference. This is the easiest way to do this, in my opinion. We're going to sew down one long side, across a short side, and up another long side. So we're going to leave the entire short side open for turning. Instead of leaving a section open here where then you have to get it turned and pressed under properly, I find leaving an open end on projects like this to be the easiest and then just folding it under. If it ends up under slightly more than a 1/4 inch, it is not going to ruin this project. And it's the quickest and fastest way to go. So that is what is going to happen next. Sew. Next, we're going to clip these 2 corners so that it's going to turn nicely. And you can cut straight across, but I like to cut kind of down at more of an angle on either side of where that stitching curves, because then you have even less fabric and you're going to get a better point when you turn that right side out. I have this all pressed and these seams pressed out. And so this is the edge that we left open. I'm simply going to fold that under about a 1/4 inch, but if it's not precise, that's okay. You just want to get it even.
I'm going to take that back to the iron, press that really quickly, and then I'm going to top stitch to close that edge. Now I have this sewn together, front to back. We've stitched that edge. Now it is time to get the hook and loop tape on. I like to put the loop tape on the top of the front because you're naturally going to roll this around and have this attached to this. And this way, when you put it onto the cart, the trains or whatever design is going to be facing the child instead of facing you. Because it's really more important that they can see the print on the fabric than what you are seeing. And so that's how I've done this one. We'll get that out of the way. So again, you can clip or pin. I just clip this in place because as you can see, they're always folded up. So they puff up a little bit. So I find putting about 3 clips on there helps keep that lined up. And now we're going to turn it over and we're going to put the loop on the opposite side. So on the back and also the opposite edge. So don't put it up here so they're on the same place. We need them to connect. And then I usually do this just to make sure I'm starting it at about the same place. Throw some clips on here. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to sew these 2 on and then we are going to be done. That's how easy it is. It's done. So you just flip it around your shopping cart and you attach the hooks to the loops. It's really simple to just fold, throw into the diaper bag, throw into your purse. Also, when you go to wash it, I would recommend you get the Velcro closed because you do not want all that Velcro sticking to your clothing in the washing machine. I'm going to be giving at least 2 to each person. Now, here's another example. It's a bit more scrappy of a design. So again, just a really cute idea. If you make these or anything else and post them on social media, be sure to tag me and also look in the description. I'll have a link for you to find lots of other ideas to sew for babies and little kids.
So what do you think? Leave me a comment. Let me know which one you're going to be trying first, if you're going to be doing more than one, and if there's anything that you wish was in this list that wasn't, because as you know, I'm always adding more tutorials and I want to make what you want to learn. In this growing age of AI, one thing that they will never replace is our hands cutting fabric and sewing things for ourselves or the ones that we love. Let's keep human-made creativity alive and just have so much fun together.